Welcome to the New Brown Memorial, our first normal start to the year since 2019. The pandemic has finally officially been pronounced as over, though I know the coronavirus is still very much with us, so do what you need to do to stay safe. Small groups are starting up. The choirs, plural, sound awesome. Gretchen Van Utt is upright and in the house. Janine preached an awesome sermon last week with very short notice. Susan Haw, and I've got this, she texted me on Saturday. It is a new day indeed. We've sung, we've celebrated, we're going to eat and celebrate some more. So the next thing to do, obviously, is for us to talk about excommunication. How to decide when we're going to kick someone out and how it's going to go down if and when it comes to that. It's important to get the terms of excommunication settled early since we are building a community here, which is one of the hardest things that anyone could try to do in 2023. Some say it is impossible. One or more of us is going to do something really unkind. One or more of us is going to do or say something mean or just foolish. One or more of us is going to project our expectations onto someone else who is going to turn around and fulfill the disappointment of not meeting those expectations that were unconsciously heaped upon them without their awareness or consent. Now, I realize that it is a bit jarring to start out the new program year celebrations this way. We expect church to be different from other communities in the world. We expect church to be full of ethical people reaching up for their better angels, not degenerating down to their baser natures. We expect people who come here to be inspired and governed by Paul's words about loving God and loving each other. Why put a damper on all of that idealism, all of this positive energy that we haven't seen in 5 years by talking about excommunication? Now, we could just ignore Matthew's teaching since the scholarly consensus is that the historical Jesus probably didn't say any of this. During Jesus' time, there was no church and probably no talk of church as such. In the Gospels, the word church, ecclesia, only appears here in this passage and 2 chapters ago when Jesus says he's going to build the church on the rock that is his disciple Peter. Ecclesia doesn't appear anywhere else in this or any other gospel. The historical consensus is that this is Matthew's community's concern, not Jesus. But whether Jesus said these words or they arose from Matthew's community, they confirm the experience of anyone who has ever spent any time in the church. You know, you get a bunch of Jesus followers in the room, agitation is bound to occur, disagreements can then take root, factions can form, an elbow will be thrown. Matthew is full of realists who already understand that when you build a community around a rabbi who does things like overturning tables in holy places or telling religious leaders that prostitutes and tax collectors are going into heaven ahead of them, you are setting yourself up for conflict. And not just any kind of conflict, but conflict with people who probably think they are the upright ones, and therefore any problems that occur are surely the result of someone else. So it's important that we deal with Matthew's guidance since this kind of junk sends people packing, and not just lay people, by the way. The pastoral world that I live in has been very agitated the last 2 weeks by the resignation of a head of staff of a large church near Chicago after he published a blog that explored the reasons that he joined that group of departing clergy that has grown so large in the wake of the pandemic that it's been termed the Great Resignation. Church life has become too difficult, he said, with unrealistic expectations coming from so many directions that whoever steps into the role is bound to fail. Janine's sermon last week sought to deal with the question, what's the use in trying when it comes to being a different kind of witness in the world? That question is also being applied by lots of people as they reconsider their participation in church. What's the use of trying to build community when this person doesn't do this or that person doesn't do that, making the whole experience less than ideal for lots of us? What's the use in trying to build community when someone's hostility or criticism from the couch or their gendered or racialized bias wounds without an awareness or willingness to change? What's the use in trying to build community when the very people who are supposed to be loving their neighbor sometimes do the opposite? Now, one solution, I think, is to seek community elsewhere. There's nothing wrong with that. I have friends outside of church. I take a class unaffiliated with the church. I serve on a board that is completely secular in nature. I find community in all of these places. You can too. Yet none of those places seek to orient my total life around the holy project that is following Jesus in the world. None of those places offer guidance on the basic human disciplines of offering forgiveness, extending grace, loving my neighbor, practicing nonviolence, honoring all people as made in the image of God. None of these places offer the possibility of multi-generational relationships outside of blood relatives where mutual care and learning can occur. And none of those places make the audacious claim that the people I work alongside of are not just colleagues or friends, but siblings in the family of God. You can find lots of community outside of church, but usually only to a certain depth. And those who try to go deeper often fail. A few years ago, a bar opened over here in Mount Vernon. It was called the Church Bar. And here, according to the website, we would find kin, we would partake and imbibe, we would find a sanctuary, a place of generosity. I thought it was a totally cool idea. Take the best of church and bring it to the bar scene. Church without all the baggage, I thought. Show up when you want it, no other strings attached. And then a bunch of bad stuff happened. Accusations about staff not being paid fairly or at all. And then bigger accusations that led to the sale of the bar to new owners. The new owners ran with the same concept, but they had already been branded as problematic, even with a vision of hospitality for everyone. A place, it said, where everyone is seen, heard, and cared for. A place where anyone who walks through the doors leaves better than when they came, as one of the new owners put it. Last week, they closed, saying they were losing thousands of dollars a week and fighting what they said were untrue accusations that they just couldn't get ahead of. It's just like real church, I thought to myself. What I really thought is that if a bar with none of the baggage of the institutional church can't make it for more than a few years, then we had better figure this out, because the culture is desperate for community that more or less works. The country is desperate for community that more or less works. And help is not coming from anywhere else. It's not coming from the business sector. It's not coming from the government or the political system that undergirds it, not right now. It's not coming from neighborhoods alone who need a vision of the whole to guard against the NIMBYism that so often characterizes neighborhoods' main concerns. We had better figure out how to make community, not perfect, just make it work. Figuring it out for Matthew means learning again that the church is not some voluntary association, but the family of God. The translation used to read, if a church member sins against you, but it was translated correctly this time, if a brother or sister or a sibling sins against you. It's not some choice to be a part of the family of God according to Jesus. It is a fact of our faith. A fact so important that when someone sins against you, you're supposed to go talk to them about it. You talk to them privately, because unlike our social media shaming culture of the moment, the purpose of calling someone out is to call them back into relationship. It's private because we're not looking to score political points by shaming someone into silence. We meet each other eye to eye and try to hash it out. There's a sustained effort to restore relationship. That's why the text recommends bringing two or three others if the first conversation doesn't work so well. Light is the best disinfectant. It's not good to hide behind anonymity. We have to own our actions and our words and subject them to the scrutiny of others. And finally, there is the recognition that sometimes people just put themselves out of fellowship. Sometimes individuals are not willing to be accountable to anyone other than themselves. Even then, the text says, treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector. Sounds harsh, except what do we know about Jesus? He spent a fair amount of time with Gentiles and tax collectors. They were outside the fold for Matthew's community, but always related to and frankly eligible to come on back in. Now, if all of this sounds a little uncomfortable to some of you, or impinges a little too much on your sense of individualism, or raises your anxiety about being named a problem by a group of religious insiders, well, let me share a little experience of a sort of excommunication that I experienced shortly after coming here to Brown Memorial. Some of you will recall that we were on the forefront of seeking marriage equality with a lot of others in the state of Maryland back in 2006 or 2007. And as part of that struggle, our congregation sponsored an effort to get our presbytery to go on the public record in favor of marriage equality. That enraged some members of our presbytery, one of whom reached out to me and set up a meeting to express his sense that I had sinned in the eyes of the Lord and I needed to repent. I patiently explained that the only sinning I saw was the Church of Jesus Christ discriminating against LGBTQ baptized Christians who simply wanted to serve Jesus Christ in their own churches, and the sinning against congregations like mine who wish to recognize God's claim and call on their lives. The only sinning was not being able to gain the protections of marriage afforded to straight couples in the state. My new friend responded by seeking another meeting, this time with 2 or 3 more supporters from their congregation. He explained that he was following the instructions given by Matthew's gospel. I was being Matthew 18'd. Well, you can predict what happened. They concluded I was outside the bounds. Charges were filed against our congregation and others supporting these efforts. Those charges were eventually dismissed, but not before I and many of you got labeled as Gentiles and tax collectors. And truth be told, we were probably calling them the same. But here's the thing. Our congregation is still in relationship with their congregation. They stayed in the presbytery despite the fact that LGBTQ Christians are leading all over our congregations in every ordained position in the church, and marriage equality has come with none of the disasters predicted, by the way. I dare say God's grace and love and justice has asked more of each of us than any of us wanted to give, and reconciliation is a little closer today than it was when I got judged as the sinner outside the bounds. Matthew 18 worked in a way, even if it didn't work the way any of us had imagined. So let's start the year with a direct reminder that we are in a community that has pledged itself to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves, including each other. Part of fulfilling that pledge is interpreting just what that means. That's what Jesus is talking about when he says whatever you loose on earth and will be loosed in heaven. It's the word used by the rabbis for interpreting the law. Our communal interpretation of what it means to love in the world is part of the holy work that Jesus gives to us. And that holy work often involves difference and disagreement. We should expect it. We should count on it. We should even celebrate it and learn how to work through those differences gently, directly, relationally, with a sense of openness that can actually lead to adventure and even joy. That work, my sisters and my brothers, my siblings in the faith, is way more significant to the world right now than maybe many of us have imagined. I mean, it's not hard to see that right now the country is in trouble. We are in desperate need of political solutions to enormous problems like unwinding systemic racism that determines where we live, our life expectancies, our incomes and our wealth, our children's success, and the depth of welcome in all public places, including the church. We are in desperate need of political solutions to climate change that is marching forward now, in fires and floods and heat waves and water shortages that are just the cusp of what is to come. We are in desperate need for solutions to gun violence and mental health challenges and educational setbacks from the pandemic. The solutions to these problems will only come if we find authentic ways to create community across difference of every kind. And I know that our church doesn't have difference of every kind, but we've got enough differences to make us a laboratory of growth to get better at loving each other in the full prophetic sense of what love across difference really means. I don't know about you, but I've got my lab coat on. I'm ready to listen, I'm ready to learn, and when needed, I'm ready to speak. It's a new day at Brown Memorial. There's so much more we can do together. The Spirit's here. I'm fired up. Are you fired up? Are you fired up? Well, let's call on the Spirit and make it happen.